Carl, welcome. I know you're a busy man, but I'm going to try and speak English. Né? You
No,
speak
perfect.
Afrikaans.
Perfect. My Mengels with Mengels.
No, Carly, welcome.
Thanks.
Unfortunately, Ron can't be here. He's obviously training.
Yeah.
So he's in the gym grinding away.
Young specimen,
Yeah, no, guys, we're fortunate enough to have Carl here. Carl is one of the SNCs at the Lions. He does a lot of work with other SNCs and he's doing a little bit of work with 8-7 as well. So we're privileged to have him on board. Guys, tonight we're going to talk a bit about everything going into from a sports scientist point of view to injuries, supplements, steroids in schools, in not just school, but everywhere. So, yeah, Carl, thanks for coming. A little bit about your background. Are you a Joburg bit?
Through and through, Joburg.
But
firstly, thanks for coming on my podcast.
Yeah. It's a pleasure.
No, definitely Joburg bit through and through. Played rugby from a young age, I think 10, 11, not as young as the normal Afrikaans Seans. And then, just ended up going overseas, came back, got into the sports science side of things. I worked at a gym in Bedfordview. And the guy was extremely passionate about his sport and high performance, and that just kickstarted it from there. And then obviously with the rugby background, that took me forward.
Yeah, but Kylie, you also in general a good sportsman. You've played a bit of golf, cricket.
Yeah, I've played at this golf course before. It's all right. Yeah. I really enjoyed. I played soccer as a youngster. I played cricket, athletics. I was a high jumper. I had absolutely no pace.
Okay.
They used to call me a cart horse. So, and then golf. So at the moment, golf and work, that's pretty much it. Trying to think. Snowboarding doesn't end well last time. Let's go for reconstructive surgery on the shoulder. But other than that, enjoy keeping active and staying fit, No,
that's great, Carl. Listen, so let's jump straight into it. In our past couple podcasts, we get a lot, and in general, I think, I don't know if you get it a lot in the public as well. And when people say there's preseason, or we say there's preseason training and then in-season training, people don't really know what's going on, especially the supporters. And I've done a podcast with my wife regarding the life of a sportsman, because a lot of people can have this imagination of, they go to rugby, kick a ball around, and that sort of stuff. So I've explained on a player's point of view what a preseason is about, but I think it would be interesting for people to hear from a coaches, especially a sports scientist, what you and Steph and the other guys do in regards to what do you look at. Say, for instance, a preseason starts. We had a 13-week preseason before the season.
Yes, yeah.
So from scratch, you go into a meeting as coaches, and how do you plan it? What do you look at? Obviously, there's GPS meters, GPS pods on you, and all that sort of stuff. So, explain a bit about the process. I don't even know the process. I don't know if you're allowed to tell the process. Or...
No, look, I mean, a preseason, whether you're here, whether you are overseas, your main goal is obviously to make the guys resilient, get them fit, get them used to the loads that they're going to get in a game. The biggest part of it, in layman's terms, is that the load that the guys go through is exponential compared to what they're going to play. So your spectators are seeing 80 minutes, which ends up being very, very small percentage of the time that these guys put in. So we sit as coaches, we plan. That goes down to gym work. It goes down to the team culture. It goes down to the fitness of the guys. So once each of the coaches has put those together, we come up with our main plan, and then we work from there. But if we speak about your preseason and building your load, you're never going to build that in a short period of time, because the body takes sort of 4 to 6 weeks to start adapting to the stimulus that you're giving it. So whether that be fitness, whether that be strength. So over a 4 to 6 week period, you see that adaptation, but you sort of want to get an extended adaptation from that. So that's why a lot of SNCs and sports scientists, they believe in a good sort of 8 to 12 week preseason. But I think it depends on each SNC and sports scientist and coach, and also the time you have available. Some guys like a 16 week. But so it comes down to that.
Yeah, I remember when Super Rugby days, and you'd obviously know, you play from February to June, and then South Africa had the local competition, which is correct. We had the URC United Rugby Championships, and then you get a couple of weeks off. But then your preseason basically started, when would I say, end of first week of December or last week of November. And it will run 4 weeks, then you have a 2-week break, and then you go back into preseason again. Just how hard is it to adapt or to structure a training schedule when you were used to, for example, for Lions played Super Rugby forever, and then now all of a sudden you've got a 16-week block. Now again it's changed. For us, the Currie Cup starts in July.
Yes.
Then the first round of URC for next season is final of the Currie Cup, something like that.
Yeah, so that they run together on that same weekend.
Yeah, so is there a lot of, probably is frustrating for you guys, but is there a lot of planning and obviously structure and things you have to adapt from last year to this year?
Yeah, I think if you look at, like you spoke about Super Rugby, it was a lot easier. You had a set time off. You had a set time to train, then those 2 weeks off. So it was quite easy to get around that because, like you say, your Currie Cup would run after the Super Rugby. Whereas now we've got the Currie Cup running sort of directly after URC, but then it runs, like you say, straight into the next URC. So it's very difficult because you need to juggle and adapt your program to allow for obviously players needing leave, needing to recover, but then you're still prepping these players for Currie Cup. So that's been the biggest challenge, but I think that's part and parcel of sport. You've got to be able to adapt, and the guys who adapt the best are usually the guys that are the forerunners. So,
like myself,
That's it. The Smith brothers.
Yeah.
Yes, there we go. Yeah, so I think it's such a good challenge though. Like, I enjoy the challenge, I really do, of really having to think outside the box. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to have roughly 4 to 5 weeks to prep the guys for Currie Cup. I mean, really get stuck into a preseason. So now we're speaking about a sort of 4 to 6 weeks to see adaptation, but now we're only going to have a 4 to 5 week preseason to really get into it. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but sometimes, I enjoy it because you don't go into the competition completely overcooked. I'd rather go into a competition slightly undercooked and then build through that competition into sort of your knockout stages and stuff like that. But yeah, it is a bit of a challenge, but yeah, it's been a good challenge.
Yeah, I saw obviously some of the boys that haven't played a lot in the URC, they've been doing the past couple of weeks a bit of baseline.
Yeah.
And is that you starting to implement them in that aspect of, because I hear what you say after 4 weeks, and I agree with you if I compare the 4 weeks of preseason to Super Rugby. But how important for me as a player, the warm-up games, where I could do as much training as I could, but the warm-up games are very crucial. Is there going to be warm-up games this year or not?
From what I've heard, there's probably going to be one warm-up game. I mean, with such a short time period before we kick off, it's going to be tough to get sort of a little mini preseason in plus 2 games. So the chats have been sort of one preseason game. Haven't really discussed who or what date it is. But I think that's where part of the challenge comes in, is in those 4 to 5 weeks, how do we go outside of the norm to get these guys ready? So that's going to come down to the sort of training methods that we go through. It'll be a really, really nice challenge, I think, to get the guys sort of match ready and match fit for that kickoff. I think it's around the first weekend of July.
Yeah. And obviously, like you say, 4 weeks left, but then you have to get game ready and all that. So I guess that leads into the next point of injuries. Especially, usually you get, I'm not saying everyone, but usually you get the first 2 weeks of preseason, you see a lot of soft tissue injuries. What do you reckon that is? Is it because obviously you guys give us a program to do on your off time, but why does that happen? It doesn't just happen at the Lions. It's always happened when I was at the Reds, Brumbies. You always get to those. What do you point that to?
Yeah, I think that's quite a common occurrence because it comes down to the load that the guys aren't used to. So, I mean, even if we give the guys a program to do before they come back, sort of to prep them for it, they're not really prepped for those high loads. They don't have a high load tolerance. So the first thing that is most likely going to go will be soft tissue. So the muscles will usually go first, and usually common with the calves and the hamstrings. And the guys have also Achilles issues and stuff. So those are the most common that we've seen. But yeah, it comes down to your sort of your load tolerance. You'll see those in the first few weeks, and as the guys start to come back from that, they sort of start to build a resilience to that. And then you get towards the end of the preseason, and you start to see all the guys filtering back in, and then they just sort of getting prepped for that first kickoff. Yeah,
you often see more, not often actually, quite more soft tissue injuries with backline players. Is it because of their speed, or is it because of their weakness?
No, look, I mean, it's obviously because they're the best looking guys on the team. Yeah, I think that's one of the big questions is they've got a lot of speed, yet the forwards have got a lot of extra sort of weight to carry around. So the challenge there is the backline players can move really quickly, but can we push them? How early do you push them as well before they get to that point? Also notoriously your forwards are a little bit more lazy in preseason. And they only really come alive at the end, But then when it gets to the season, they're the real workhorses. They're the ones who take you forward, and the backs just do all the pretty stuff.
Yeah, we must just get that in a clip. So that's my first clip that I'm gonna put out there. So now, Carly, actually the main subject I want to talk about, because obviously we've started this rugby clinic, and you actually had a good chat at Alberton. The reason behind this podcast, I think it was a couple of them actually. One boy started asking you about gym and supplements and that sort of stuff. And I think it's a massive, massive subject for parents, for the players themselves. Yeah. And I don't think there's someone better to give advice on that sort of stuff. So the first question, there will be a few questions on the subject. We'll get into the big one a bit later. So, at what age is it appropriate for boys, girls, whoever plays rugby, to start lifting weights? And the second question on top of that is, what sort of resistance training and weight training would you recommend for them to do if they decide?
Yeah, so I think it all comes down to the sort of stimulus that you're giving the guys in the gym, or guys and girls. You can't say that they can't lift weights. I mean, there's a lot of research coming out now. There's a lot of coaches internationally who actually got a lot of youngsters in the gym lifting weights. As long as your technique's good and your weights are light enough for you to do the reps that you need to. Obviously, some good high reps with those youngsters. But for myself, I think it's the most important part is your movement patterns. So if you can get youngsters in the gym doing movement patterns and strength around that, so your pull-ups, your push-up. I mean, that's extremely important to the development of youngsters, and that can lead into your weight training. But if those movement patterns aren't right, I think that's a problem sort of we've seen, especially with youngsters these days, is they aren't as active anymore. So they're always on their phones, they're always on an iPad, and they're not outside playing, they're not outside climbing trees. And that sort of has an effect on their movement patterns. So you now start seeing kids coming through to school level or high school level who can't do a push-up. They can't do a pull-up. They're really good at Fortnite. But yeah, that's about it. So to get into that gym process and to develop that strength, you've got to start young, and you've got to start the right way, which is, like I said, it's your movement, your fundamentals. Once you get that right, you can start moving and doing those fundamentals with added weight. And that I believe that creates great resilience with youngsters.
Yes, it's funny how you just mentioned how times have changed with, yes, we didn't have iPads and laptops and those sort of things. So I can't speak. The first time I got a PlayStation, I didn't leave the TV, but how times have changed and how you see it from another point of view. And I've never even looked at it like that, about you saying how the postures change and that sort of stuff. That's actually very eye-opening, to do that. And once you just said that, you don't see kids interested in that sort of stuff anymore, in weight training or that sort of stuff. But in saying that, would you say it would be safer, because obviously in today's society, the kids start gymming, especially the rugby boys and that sort of stuff, start gymming quite early, and the ego lifting comes in and that sort of stuff. So you say there's no certain age, but if there's an age, would you say you would recommend a personal trainer to supervise that sort of stuff at a certain age, and then he can go on to doing his own thing?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue these days, and speaking about social media at the moment, is all the social media coaches that you've got.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's starting a profile where they believe, they know the right way. This is how qualified are they? And with youngsters being on their phones the whole time, it just takes one image of a guy that looks like Hulk Hogan in his prime to sort of captivate them and get them going and say, right, well, now I'm going to believe in this guy's gym program. Yet this youngster's maybe 14, 15 years old. There he is pushing 4 or 5 reps in a gym of weights that he can't do. And then that sort of leads to the start of those injury problems. Like as their bodies are still developing, they've still got, soft bone, which is developing as well. And it's I think at 16, between the ages of 16 to 18, you can get them into weight training as long as it's well supervised by a well qualified person. And I think that's extremely important with youngsters.
From a parent's perspective, if parent comes to you, what do parents need to look for in a coach? Because obviously you get your bodybuilder coach, you get your sports science, but obviously you can cover your knowledge is because, like you said, you get guys that genetically are blessed, that do all the compound lifts and that sort of stuff, and now they're personal trainers. How do parents watch out for that? I guess it's a tough question, sorry, but it's like, the approach for parents. What should they look at?
No, I think it's a great question. I think your personal trainers, I mean, they're great at what they do. If you've got a personal trainer that's really good at bodybuilding, and you want your kid to be a bodybuilder, then you go to a bodybuilding coach. Yeah. I think a really nice challenge for parents to maybe set themselves is to find a sports trainer or a personal trainer who has an extensive history in sport. Yeah. Whether that be soccer, whether that be rugby. So if you can find that and you can sort of nail it down and do a little bit of homework on that, I think you'll really be on the right track. There are some really, really good SNCs out there, some really good trainers. As I mentioned earlier, I worked under a guy in Bedfordview who owns his own gym, and his level of knowledge is extremely, extremely high. Yet he played rugby for the Lions under 19 and 21 back in the day. So he understands the components that you need to put together for that. So it doesn't really help. I want my son or daughter to be a rugby player or a soccer player, and I'm sending them to a bodybuilding coach at the age of 14, 15. It's never going to be good for where they're heading.
Yeah, and those, I don't know if it's, they call it in Afrikaans, ou mens stories. That stories of kids just starting to gym early, then their tendons don't recover. Is there a sense of truthness in that?
Yeah, there is. But as I say, it comes down to the sort of the weights you're doing, the exercises you're doing. As I mentioned, you sort of get these growth plates on the end of the bone that is sort of spongy bone. And only later in life, sort of between 18, 21, do those really ossify into sort of solid bone. Now, if you think about it, you've got ligaments and tendons attached to that. So if you're really loading those extensively, you've got ligaments, you've got tendons pulling away at that, and that has a huge effect on development and or later in life. Because they get in a gym and they've just continuously got issues because their bodies haven't developed well or haven't developed properly. So if you can get the right movement patterns and stuff going between the ages of, call it 10 and 16, you're going to really, really set them up for good development beyond that. So that's extremely, it is a true story. Yeah. It just comes down to sort of what you are doing at that age.
And I guess this is actually a question for myself. I believe if you take back 15 years or 10 years when you're 22, 21, I feel the SNC sort of things has changed and rugby has changed. And where you used to, for every way, max bench, see how baby you can. Yes, that is important. But I had a coach in Australia, Brad Thorne. Thorne was, before I signed my contract at the Reds, he first wanted to gym with me. And that's when I was still a keen guy, Yeah. But he was massive on flexibility. Yeah. Technique, no ego lifting. He said he would rather want you to squat 120 kilograms, ass to the floor, hips open, than 250, whatever. And I know there's a place for everything. But don't you think rugby is changing in the aspect of more to the side of not powerlifting, but explosive and that sort of stuff? Do you see it has changed?
No, massively. I mean, I think back to when I played at a SNC that was doing things completely different to the way that we do things now. I had a chat with Elliot Walters when he was still with the Springboks as an SNC, and I said to him, what do you see as the biggest change? Like, why do Europe seem so different to South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand? And he said that the Europeans had seen how dominant Southern Hemisphere rugby was in terms of their physicality, their strength. And they put so much money and effort into the science behind it and researching what's best for the human body, what's going to take them forward, what's going to really improve the performance of the players. And because they put so much money and time into it, they ended up slingshotting past anything that the Southern Hemisphere were doing at the time. And with that science or that scientific approach, it's really, really changed the game in what we do. I mean, if you look, let's go back 5 years, you didn't have such things, or you might have had force plates and stuff like that. And now you've got force plates where you're measuring the output in jumps, you're measuring the output in all sorts of isometric exercises as well, and GPS as well. So everything's sort of changed so much to make the game more efficient and to make players stronger in sort of in positions and at what they do, and optimizing them for sort of what they are able to do. It's changed the game massively.
I actually forgot to touch on that when we were at preseason. Just explain to the people, because we wear GPS pods when we play, when we train, we don't miss. And those basically, Carl will tell you guys now what does it get picked up, or what does it pick up with it. But how important are those things in rugby? Because for the past, I would say 5, 6 years, did we have them before? How long were they?
Trying to think, we go back maybe 4 or 5 years on the GPS, but if you're talking Australia, New Zealand and Europe, I mean, they probably go back a good 10, 12 years, maybe even more. But the GPS picks up massive metrics. You've got all sorts of things. So it all comes down to what you as a sports scientist are looking for, what you as an organization are looking for. It becomes extremely important in how do we measure what we are doing, and does that align with our identity as a team, how we play? If you're a running team and you want to play a fast game, those are the metrics that you're looking at. So it's also good for monitoring the players. So you have players that are notorious for working extremely hard as yourself.
Obviously. That's why I'm so peak condition.
There you go.
Age of 34.
34, you look at least 24.
Thank you.
No, so so we use the data as well to sort of monitor the players and pick up trends on whether the guy's at risk of injury, whether we can push them a little harder. And, that comes down to the science side of it. And often people speak of the art of coaching. So you got to have that good balance between sort of the art of coaching and the science. If you can get that balance really right, I think that's what most of the top teams are really getting right.
Just for interesting, since you were at the Lions, what was the highest week from a backline player and a forward player in a preseason?
Sure, if I go back and think about it, I know upwards of, if I speak about sort of us, I've seen up close to 30 kilometers in a week of running. That would be your backline players.
And people don't get that. It's off the deck. It's short. That's not what's your max 200 meters you run.
Yeah.
And then so it's a lot of, so that's massive.
30 kilometers of rugby. Imagine that. So it is a lot. I chatted to someone overseas. I can't remember who it was, and they said they've like 30 kilometers is mild.
Really?
I think in Japan and maybe Australia, there were teams that were close to 50 kilometers in a week in preseason.
Yeah. I remember a guy called old friend of mine, Nick Uester. We were at the Reds, and I think he did once 42 kilometers.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that was a lot, but I don't see any. You're gonna laugh. I don't see any benefit in it. Obviously, I'd rather no. Now we've touched a bit on everything now, but now I want to talk a bit about the big one. I want to talk about steroids. I think there's a lot of parents out there. I think there's a lot of parents in general that get this stuff for their children because of the pressure rugby creates today. I mean, at the age of 15, the guys are getting contracts. Pressure to getting contracts. They're sports scientists full-time. They have whatever, a professional system basically. So it's a massive problem, I think, not just in South Africa, in the whole world. So first of all, I'm going to name a few. I don't know, then we'll jump into what it does to the body and at what certain age. Yeah, let's go into what's anabolics. Anabolics, what the hell's that?
So I suppose if you're talking anabolics, you're talking your steroids that are sort of altering your hormones or increasing hormone levels, your testosterone, your growth hormone. Okay. So having an effect on how quickly you recover, having an effect on how much stronger you get, how much bigger you get. So when we speak about anabolic, that's your building phase. If you go into the gym in your gym, sort of the minute you finish that gym, you go into a catabolic state, which is the body's breaking down. The anabolic is the body building itself up. So anything sort of anabolic with regards to steroids is sort of helping that body build up sort of as quick as it can, recover as quick as you can.
And so you obviously, and then you get so to name a few, is that like, but what's anabol?
Sure, yeah, you can go.
There's heaps of them, right?
There's heaps, yeah. There's a huge amount of
So Carl,
anabolic steroids.
What is it actually used for? Is it for horses? Is it true it's for horses? Because I'm not pretending. I don't know anything about this stuff. I know you get SARMs now. I know you get peptides. What's the difference between SARMs and peptides?
Yeah, I think your peptides, it obviously depends which ones you're using. You got growth hormone releasing peptides. So those are synthetic substances that are stimulating the body to release more sort of hormones. I know that you had your growth hormone releasing peptide, so that stimulates the pituitary gland to release more growth hormone. So you're not artificially giving more growth hormone to the body, but you're stimulating the body to now produce more. So it's just as illegal. You're just doing it in a way that some people believe is more natural, but it's not natural. Yeah,
and I've read about it in the past, because I won't lie, I was in the past, I did consider using it myself, injuries and that, but I never did it. I was not too scared of it. To be honest, I probably was too scared I'll get caught. Dead honest with you, but I've never touched it. But I read a lot about once you use a certain thing, say you use testosterone, and I don't know for how long, but then your natural production of testosterone also gets, and then your body doesn't produce natural testosterone anymore. Then you have to be on that shit forever. Is that?
Yeah, look, to be completely honest, I'm not 100% sure on that. I know it will obviously depend from person to person, sort of what age you take it, the amount you take. But sort of no substance that you're putting into your body that's artificially improving you or your performance is going to be good for your body.
Yeah. And do you reckon why the boys use it at schoolboy level? It's because of a coach saying, are you too small, or people saying you're too small, or is it they want to get an edge, they want to get that contract? Is it pressure from parents, or is it a combination of all of it? Where do you think it comes from most from?
I think this is a great conversation. This can go on for hours about schoolboys and steroids and stuff like that. And like you said, I think it's a combination of all of that. You know, you've got your rugby rankings at the moment where everyone wants to be in the top 10 for the schools. You know, I think there was a point where they brought out rugby rankings for individual players. So this was supposed to be about 2-3 years back. I saw something like that, and that sort of encourages it in a way.
Yeah.
And sometimes you've got parents trying to live vicariously through their kids. You know, they see their kid being a Springbok, and you've got to go back and see what is the percentage of school kids that come out of school that first of all get a professional contract. And of those that get that professional contract, what percentage make it in the franchises beyond junior level? And then what percentage of those actually become a Springbok?
Yeah.
So your chance that your kid's going to become a Springbok it's minimal. Yet you're willing to risk your kid's health at the expense of that. And I think that's the biggest issue is you've really got to look at in sort of 10, 20 years time, what's your kid going to look like? Where's your kid going to be? You know, like you've got so many risks. You've got heart risk. You've got lung risk. You've got all the injuries. I mean, it's quite a common thing at schools. The guys are getting injured because they're getting too strong for where they are in their development phase.
Yeah. And that's why I've seen a lot of, and in the past as well, I had a few guys that I knew that wasn't in rugby that use it because it's quite massive in Australia. But it's not nearly as big as it is in schoolboys as it is in Australia. It's almost unheard of in Australian schoolboy rugby. That's why the other day, I won't say the school's name, but I watched the schools and I looked to myself and I said, that's not normal, man. I mean, you can maybe lie to your parents, but I've seen big boys and I've seen big schoolboys. That's not normal. You know, you get the natural big, but then you get the, Baywatch big.
You're freaks, yeah.
Yeah. And I just saw that. And just on the injury side of things, about your internal injuries, your kidneys and but your joints and your tendons and stuff, that definitely has an impact on the day.
Definitely, yeah. So as I spoke earlier about your muscles pulling on that spongy bone, your ligaments, your tendons, those are all still developing throughout high school. You really, it takes a long time for your body to get to the full developed stage. Now you're adding artificial substances to your body that are helping you get stronger. So you're already putting all of that strain on your ligaments, your tendons, your muscles, your joints. So all of that strain's already there. Now you're giving an artificial supplement that is making you stronger, that you can lift more and you can put more strain on that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can't think of any specific schoolboy cases that I can remember, but you often ask yourself why, when somebody comes out of school and, like you say, you look and you say, can't be natural.
Yeah.
He might not have tested positive or even been tested, yet he suffers with injuries his entire career. And maybe it's a genetic thing, and maybe it's just misfortune. But you sort of start to ask yourself, with all of that developmental stage that's gone on, if you are taking something artificial, how much is that affecting your body?
Yeah.
And that's, like you say, that's not even the internal risk of kidneys, liver, heart, and stuff like that.
Good. Two questions. You don't really see the boys. Okay, say they start using it from standard 8 or year 10 or whatever it is now. Then they get through it after their year 12, they might cram week, whatever. But then the injuries start coming once they're in a professional system. Is it because of their body gets that double load, or is it because of the steroid use that their body, it is just too much for their body, or they adapt to the professional system?
I think it's twofold. We've got to ask ourselves how much was done at school to ensure that they kept playing. Because obviously you got your rankings, so your schools are adamant. I mean, you look at how big the festivals are, you look at all of that, and how much of it comes down to a kid's injured at the moment, and we go, right, let's strap and play. So now he's already being knocked back, and you are just saying, right, we're just going to strap him and play. And so we sort of maybe don't have enough access to that information and who's gone through those sorts of processes, but I think their kids' bodies take an absolute beating. And then on top of that, they now filter through into professional rugby, where the level of rugby is a lot higher. The level of training is a lot higher. So you're really, really pushing your body to the limits now, but it's already on the edge because you haven't given it the development it needs to get to that point and to be able to push beyond that point.
Yeah. So, Carl, there's no such thing as a safe steroid. You can't, because a lot of people justify it and say, okay, go to your GP and let him test your blood. Yes, there's a place for when you get older for testosterone replacement therapy and that sort of stuff. That I get. You can't tell me that there is, okay, now go to your GP, he will get you on and then it's not dangerous. Because kids don't understand there's post-cycle stuff you need to take. They say, okay, they want to get big now. Where am I going to get it? Okay, let's get whatever I can get. Let's inject it. The consequences of that is stuff you have to take weeks after for your estrogen levels. Can you explain a bit more on that? What the steroid actually does to all those, your testosterone, your estrogen, or whatever it is?
Yeah, look, so you're putting effectively a steroid you're putting into your body. It's artificial, it's hormones. So that's going to already affect all the sort of hormone development that you've got going on in your body. So now your body's confused, saying, listen, this is where I'm supposed to be going. This is where this thing's taking me. So it's quite a common conception of the fact that you sort of, when you take anabolic steroids and you take testosterone, that your estrogen levels, once you sort of finish a cycle, your estrogen levels are up massively. And that's where we get the term moobs, where guys end up with man boobs. And it's sort of, as far as I understand, it's almost impossible to get rid of those.
Really?
Without surgery. That's, I mean,
yes, yeah.
Could be a bit wrong there. Need to do a bit of homework there. But you sort of got to think to yourself, what's the risk factor? You're throwing so much at a young developing body to try and make it, and there's no real substitute for, in my opinion, hard work. You can go take steroids and not work hard, and it just becomes a disaster as well. But if you allow a kid to go through that full development phase, get them strong, get them moving well, and allow them to build that strength up, and if they work really hard and they've got really good nutrition, there should be no reason why they haven't given themselves every possibility to make it. Yeah. And then it comes down, unfortunately, to natural talent and every other circumstance. You got coaches who might not like players. That player might go to another place. There might be a late developer. I mean, we've seen it before. You get guys who are unbelievable at schoolboy level at sort of 18 years old, untouchable. By 22, 23, they've washed out of the system because They were just so well developed at that point.
Yeah.
And everybody catches up and passes them, I think the risk's just not there. There's no safe steroids.
And like you said, hard work and obviously a little bit of genetics. If I take players, even guys like Edwell and Crappy and guys like David Pocock, a few guys I've played with, yes, they've got good genetics, but they work fucking hard as well.
Yeah.
And if you could say Edwell is on Winslow, but I know he's not, but that's the same comparison. So, yeah, but where do you think these kids, is it easy to get access of it? And
well, with the level of it going on, I mean, there's a book out recently, I can't remember which one it was, South African guy had written it about the level of steroids in schoolboy level, or at schoolboy level. And it seems to be quite an epidemic. And it obviously is quite easy to get sort of access to those. There's guys doing deals under the counter at supplement stores and stuff like that. And it's, I suppose you can't really put a full stop to that. You can't stop that. But as a parent, as a developing youngster, you've got to sit and think, is it really worth it? Personally, I don't think there's anything that makes it worth it. To live to 30 and have kidney failure,
And I think it's also probably, is it addictive or not?
I think so. I can't speak sort of through experience with anyone that I've actually interacted with. But if you think about it, you take a steroid, you get stronger, you get bigger, and how school kids are. They look better, they go on back and all of a sudden they've got a great big body and they've got girls are chasing them. And so that thrill and that rush sort of, that has to be addictive. You get that dopamine release from that. And then what do you do next from there? Is that a gateway drug to further things? If you don't stay in sport and you go to varsity or whatever it is, you become a bit of a Joburg jawler. What does that open up to? And the connections of the people that you interact with. Because if you're interacting with people where you're getting steroids, it's not, I wouldn't quite call them your savory characters. So you're sort of mingling in those circles, and what gateway does that open to? Maybe harder drugs. So you never know what that opens the door to.
And for me, the scariest thing is a 16-year-old, 15-year-old boy can go into a gym, ask the guy get steroids. But how easy is it? That guy doesn't give a fuck about the kid. He can give him, throw that steroid, throw him, and that kid can go inject. Guys, kids don't understand how dangerous it is. Is there any signs for parents to look out for their kids using not just steroids, but let's focus on steroids?
Yeah, so I think it's a tough one, because as kids go through sort of that teenage period, their hormone levels are altering, so you get kids that have bad acne, you get kids who have mood swings, and those are all notorious that's sort of what you'll look for. And I'm not saying first thing, kids got acne, kids got a bit of a bad temper, right, off we go for a drug test.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine we did that as youngsters. I've been at the doctor every week. But no, so looking for things, really, if your kids sort of face changes all of a sudden to sort of very, very square jawline structure, bad acne, and obviously the common one is just massive growth out of nowhere. So yes, your kid's going to go through growth spurts, but most likely going to go through a growth spurt where they're going taller rather than wider.
Yeah.
If they're going tall and wide and they've got bad skin and bone structure changes and they've got huge anger issues and stuff, pretty much as obvious it can be then.
Yeah.
But like you say, it becomes difficult because how much of a role are the parents having in that?
Yeah.
And where do the kids then get the money for it?
Yeah.
Are you enabling, or are they doing it on the sly? And I suppose if they're doing it on the sly and you're looking for those sort of indications, those are the ones to look for. Just massive change in sort of mood swings over and above what your normal teenager would show.
Yeah. No, Kyle, I think that's about it. I think it's a massive problem in today's society with the steroid use, and I think parents should be aware of it. I think children should be aware of it. It's not worth, I'll say it now, it's not worth playing professional rugby for 15 years, dying kidney failure at the age of 40 or 40. It's not worth it. So, yeah, Kylie, thank you very much. We'll see you at 8-7 Rugby. Thanks for joining us.
No,
it was awesome to have you, Colin. I think we'll have to do another one. And we can. I think there's a lot of subjects and topics we can talk about. Even I learned a few things, so I'm not that smart. Even
Jeez, shocked me.
even though I
No, thanks for having me. Really
Yeah.
appreciate it. I always enjoy discussing these sort of things. As I say, you can go on for hours about this stuff. But so many different components to look at. Just if you're talking just schoolboy rugby in general, if you're talking professional rugby, there's so much you can speak about. I think just the best advice for sort of any parents out there is just to make sure that you give your kid every possible opportunity to develop properly first. Because if you don't do that, like, the body is sort of a wonderful thing. It will develop and it will get to a point where you can really push it to its limits. If you're pushing it to its limits before it's developed, you're probably going to have continuous issues with that body, whether it's internal, whether it's external. It's going to affect the kid sort of later on in life, and how much of an effect that going to have on sort of them in adulthood, them as a parent. So I definitely don't think it's worth putting that amount of pressure on someone to make it.
And just a last thing, Carl, for because I think I'll assume I'll get a few messages regarding parents. Are you available? And you don't have to answer now, but are you available to work? Obviously, for guys, give them programs, or obviously at your fee, you'll have a fee for it. But are you available for people to reach out to you in regards to that, or are you not allowed to do that?
No, look, always willing to sort of help out. I came from a background where I've worked with primary school kids. I've worked with high school kids, and what you see in terms of their development is, I mean, at professional level, you're putting in weeks and months of work to see a 1% change. At those levels, you putting in considerably less effort to see huge changes. So no, I'm always keen to sort of help out in the community with schoolboys and stuff like that.
Because I don't think there's anyone better to get in touch with if you're a parent. So I'll just forward them your email address, and
thanks.
10% comes to me. Whatever you
10% of free. Does it charge them nothing? You get 10% of that.
You can't work for free, brother. You get too busy. But no. Anyway, Carl, thank you. You've also got a few days off now, eh? Or you don't. You went in today.
No, I was just today. Then I'm off till Friday.
Okay. Thanks for coming, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Not bad for a side, eh?
No, not so bad.
We
got 3 in one Afrikaans word.
Yeah.